There we go. Good morning, everyone. Happy Friday. I appreciate everyone's flexibility on the schedule change. We usually have this at 10 a.m., but I had a mandatory training pop up, so I had to unfortunately move the schedule. It's always fun when those pop up. We're having our monthly directors meeting today. I've got a number of updates to share. If you could put your name in the chat box real quick, just to help with attendance, that would be appreciated. Just who you are, who you work for. We don't need anything too crazy. I always like to hear any news though. If you have any like cool news to share or accolades or positive stuff, love hearing that stuff. If you have anything, go ahead and throw that in the chat box so we can celebrate those together. It is a Friday and it's sunny, but it is cold. It got cold again. I don't, this has been a kind of a crazy, I don't know, spring weather. And my kids are very confused and upset about being able to go out and then not go out, then go out. So that's Iowa for you. But I think we'll go ahead and get started here. So like I mentioned, this is our monthly directors meeting. This is the first that we're having after our contract with the Iowa After School Alliance ended earlier this month. So last week. So we are very sad to see that end. And I have on the agenda here, I wanted to just quickly remind everyone, even though the contract has ended for like R&R Consulting, who helped with our local program evaluations and a lot of the data collection and oversight, and then the Iowa After School Alliance helped with the application process and meetings and kind of a large subset of things. We are still doing those things. Those are still requirements of the group. It's just that we've taken it in-house in an effort to try to help kind of save some funds and be more efficient with the funding that we receive from the federal government. So it means a bit more work for Joe and for our team, but we've kind of shuffled things around, and again we're trying to be much more efficient as a state agency and doing as much as we can in-house to save as much funding as we can. So I don't know if there's any questions about those contracts that have ended. The R&R Consulting one was back in December. The After School Alliance just ended here, like I said, last week. Are there any questions about those contracts and ending and duties and stuff like that? No? Okay. I would say continue to reach out to Heidi. I know the last meeting she had mentioned that they're still around. They're not going away or anything. They still offer some great services. They still have lots of great webinars. They hosted one earlier this week that I attended. I think I saw a couple of you on there about just different populations and youth and working with youth in different areas. That was really beneficial. So I would strongly recommend if you're not on their newsletter or you're not kind of a member of their group signing up. It's free. I think they have paid services, but a majority of what they do is free. So if you were relying on the After School Alliance stuff by coming to these meetings, I would say go ahead and reach out to them, go to their website and sign up for everything to get those directly moving forward. I plan to have Heidi join from time to time if they have things to share or they have any updates. I will also forward information to you that I hear from them or that I hear from the kind of national groups or other resources that I think are helpful. But their direct contract with the state of Iowa has ended. We are looking at what we plan to do with the Iowa21cclc.com site. So we kind of have the two sites. We have the government, educate.iowa.gov site, and then we have the Iowa21cclc.com site. There's a little bit of crossover between the two. We are probably going to sunset that Iowa21cclc.com site and host all of the information and resources either directly on the Department of Ed site or like a Google site, like a slightly less formal kind of a supplemental site that would house eventually these recordings, meetings, agendas, resources, that sort of stuff, as well as our the grant application archive and a bunch of other information that is housed on that additional site. So I will let everyone know kind of leading up to that. I believe we have the contract for that site paid out through May or June of this year. So we still have time to kind of figure things out before that would close. It will continue to exist until that time. So again, kind of part of the efforts to move things in-house and have kind of more consolidated in a centralized location. My next item I wanted to bring up is the 21 APR federal data collection. Thank you everyone for getting everything in on time. Yay! I was able to review and spend some time going through the data and certify it with the Federal Department of Education. I think everything looked fine. I may be reaching out to some of you if there were gaps in data or if there was anything that looked maybe I don't want to say troubling is maybe the wrong word, but if we're having issues of either collecting enough data to report, or it seems like we've really dramatically dropped in performance areas, and there was no narrative to help explain that, I may be reaching out to kind of better understand what might be happening and how we can support you in those efforts. Um, I have not been told this specifically, but I think the federal government is going to be looking at that data a bit more closely moving forward. Just with all of the talk about shutting the Department of Education and just trying to make sure programs are running at optimum levels and the return on investment is there. I just have a feeling that they're going to be looking at a lot of things much more closely than they have in the past. I appreciate everyone getting that in on time, and we didn't have anybody that missed the deadline, so that was super appreciative. And like I said, nothing really jumped out at me as being problematic, and I was able to certify everything and explain everything based on the comments that I did receive, and able to sometimes look at your local program evals if something was maybe even a little confusing. I reached out to a couple of groups just to kind of clarify some things. But again, appreciate it. Another year is gone, so we don't have to worry about it that much until next year, or at least it's quite a bit of time here. But happy that that's over. We have the third quarter claim period opening up pretty soon here. So on April 1st, so it's hard to believe that that's next week already. The March has kind of just blown by. So April 1st is when that will open, and then it will close on April 30th. I think that falls in the middle of the week, so we don't have the weird thing where if it's on the weekend, it's on the next Monday. So pretty clean cut. I think it starts on a Wednesday and ends on a Wednesday. It's kind of a nice little cutoff period. But I will send reminders out on that, and just try to kind of keep everybody updated. Um, some kind of just quick reminders when you're submitting that information. Please make sure that your ledgers show a start date of July 1st, 2025, and then running through the current date. So that we know it's year end or year to date. We need to see that it's everything that has been collected from ideally it would actually say July 1st, 2025 through June 30th, 2026, and it shows a collection of everything that you've acquired, all of your expenses. Sometimes I have to send reminders, but we need to see that year to date, not just a specific quarter. You can do both if it's easier for you, if you have the year to date, but then you break it out based on the quarter. But we sometimes get some requests from our accounting groups that we need to show the year to date. They need to see the entire collection of expenses up to the current date. Also try to make sure when you're submitting your budget worksheet that you're updating the enrollment counts by site. Sometimes that gets missed. It's kind of housed a little bit above the budget areas, and sometimes groups forget to update that. That's something else that we try to keep track of and that we are required to watch as part of our monitoring requirements through the Federal Department of Education, just trying to kind of keep an eye on enrollments. And then again, just trying to see if there's anything where we maybe saw a sharp decrease that we may need to talk about, or if there's something that I can do to help support you in that area. But it's something that we're required to keep an eye on. Again, it is a federal requirement. I'm not sure if there's any questions about the third quarter claims. No? Okay. I will be asking for carryover estimates. We generally wait until about the end of the third quarter claims, so you have a better idea of what you have available to continue to spend for the remainder of this fiscal year for fourth quarter. But if you have ideas of what that's going to look like, you can certainly send them to me. I just know sometimes things change, costs jump out or prices maybe fluctuate. So we try to get as accurate as possible as we're planning for the year ahead for any potential carryover. We generally only allow around 15% of your budget to be carried over. We have some exceptions if something occurred, if you had some field trips that had to be canceled because of weather or transportation or whatever. We have a little bit of flexibility built into there, but it's definitely something that we want to have a conversation about. If we have groups that are having consistent large amount of carryover, then we might need to look at reducing our funding or trying to figure out what's going on, because that again is an issue that we sometimes run into with the federal government with spending down the funds in an appropriate manner and appropriate timeline. So something to try to keep in mind, and it's something that I can work with you with or on in different ways. But I will send out a more formal request when we get a little bit further into the year about carryover estimates, and then we can have that conversation. Community partner data requests. So this is something that Heidi was trying to wrap up before the contract ended, and I think a majority of you got her information. But if you did not give her a copy of your current community partners, that would be greatly appreciated. This again is a requirement of our grant as a state agency that oversees this funding. We are required to publicly post a listing of all of your community partners. That's something that would appear in your local evaluations, but it's something that we actually have to collect as a state and then post on our site or on a similarly public site as a centralized location of all of our community partners that support your work throughout the state. So if you have not done that, please send that information to me, and I'm compiling that list, and then it will be posted on the Department of Ed's site in the near future. Again, to meet a requirement of the federal government. I need to go back through that list because, like I said, I think a lot of you had submitted them, but I'm going to have to go back through because I'd rather make sure we have the entire list before I post, then post it, then take it down and post it. And Iowa generally leads the nation in the number of our community partners. So that's something we definitely want to kind of sing your praises on in how involved you are within your communities in different ways. Very good. The Unified Allocation Plan. So we haven't heard much in terms of updates on the Unified Allocation Plan. I know I've mentioned this a couple of meetings now, but there were some changes back in January where some waivers and some exceptions were granted to the state of Iowa in a couple of different ways for different federal education funding programs. There wasn't really anything that impacted the 21st Century Community Learning Centers grant other than our ability to combine state activities funds with some of our other ESEA federal education programs. We're still working with the Federal Department of Education on a plan of what that looks like and how to accomplish that in a really a collaborative and effective way. So nothing has changed yet. As a reminder, that had nothing to do with your funding. That was really just the funding that we use as a state to support you in different ways. So it would not involve your funding in any way. We were not combining your funding with other groups or anything like that. It would not reduce your current funding amounts or anything. That was really just as a state, we were provided more flexibility about how we kind of collaborate across education programs with our state activities funds that would potentially benefit fund recipients across multiple programs, not just on an individualized program basis. So again, still trying to figure out what that might look like. So I don't really have any other updates. I'll just keep this on there as a placeholder in case anything comes up. I wanted to spend a little bit of time giving you some updates on the application process and the grants that we're currently reviewing for the next fiscal year. So I think I had mentioned before, but we had 11 well-qualified applicants. That was almost a 100% increase, almost double from what we had last year of only 6 applicants. 4 of those applicants were new, so that's great. We had a pretty good mixture of public school districts and also community-based organizations. We've been spending a bit more time, and we're trying to be more transparent of this process. Because I know a lot of groups apply kind of in the December timeframe, and then it's kind of radio silence until April when awards are announced. So I wanted to give a little bit of a background about kind of what's happening, and we're going to try to be a bit more transparent in the future about this. But after applications are submitted by the end of December, what happens is that we have an independent team of peer reviewers that go through and review the applications. This last application cycle, they were hired by the Iowa After School Alliance. So they were recruited, they had to actually apply, they had to be vetted, they signed a non-disclosure agreement. So a very thorough process. They were trained on what to do, but a very thorough process that essentially takes 2 months for these teams of reviewers to go through the applications and score them based on the rubrics that we provide and all of your application materials and resources. So for about 2 months, they go through and really do a deep dive of the applications. They provide all of that information to us at the end of February. So essentially January through February is independent review time and scoring. For March and April, we receive all of that information, that giant data dump. And then as a state agency, we have requirements and rules that we have to run through all of that information and check for kind of more of the kind of boring stuff, compliance, risk, applicant eligibility, just kind of confirming things on the back end. We spend quite a bit of time going through the application, like I said, of looking at, is this compliant? Is this not? Is this sort of risky behavior that could lead to concerns, either legal issues, or again, are we able to kind of commit to what's required of the grant in terms of state rules, federal rules, policies, code. Like I said, kind of some of the boring stuff. But that generally takes about 2 months as well. So throughout March and April, we've been doing that process. I've reached out to a couple of our applicants, or a number of them, just to gather some additional information, have it continue conversations. We still intend to have a public announcement by the end of April here, but we're trying to fund as many of our applicants as possible. We had close to $14 million requested, and we only have about $7 million from the federal government. So again, we're trying to get creative with how we're funding as many programs as possible, even though almost double the amount that we have available was requested. Pretty much all of the applicants really swung for the fences for that maximum amount. So we're having conversations and trying to figure out how to make that work for as many groups as possible. Are there any questions about the application process and kind of the review and the scoring and everything? Okay. Like I said, we're trying to be more transparent. It's something that we're going to try to do better next year, both reaching out to groups more consistently with updates, but also on our website, just trying to better explain kind of what's happening during that long period, essentially 5 months from the end of December through the end of April, of just kind of what's happening on the back end. Because we do get questions, and I'm sure it's confusing and not knowing what's going on. One new thing, and I mentioned this when I sent the email earlier this week with the agenda for this meeting, but I developed a very basic, I think it's like 5 or 6 questions, a Google survey or Google form survey, just to try to gauge what might be of interest in terms of professional development opportunities and best practices in this year ahead. Um, like I mentioned, with the ending of the Iowa After School Alliance contract, that was something that they oversaw, and they would kind of pull in some national groups or some state groups, and it generally aligned with what they were hearing as an after school alliance agency or an organization. So I want to try to customize it a bit more to your specific needs and not maybe be as generalized. So if you could take that survey, I'd really appreciate it. You can also just reach out and say, hey, I was at this conference and this group talked, or this topic was really interesting. That might be something that the group of subgrantees would want to hear about, or that might be something we would want to do or try here in Iowa. Definitely send those to me, and it might be something that we can try to figure out. Either something that we pay to have occur on a virtual or in-person level, or something that maybe the group can do for free and just do for us, again, either at a virtual or in-person type of experience. This is something that I would like to do more of, rather than having the group kind of be on their own for some of the professional development stuff. And especially if it's things that we can provide for you at a free or discounted rate, and then we can reinvest some of those professional development dollars into your program and your students in different ways. I want to try to look specifically at the requirement of spending 5% of your budgets on professional development. I would like to see that lower, again, to try to make sure that as much as your funding is going directly to the students as possible, or your staff to support them in different ways. I'm a huge proponent of professional development, but if we can get really good quality stuff either at a free or a severely discounted rate because we're providing it as a state agency, I would love to have more funding for you all to use to provide for your students. So please take that survey if you haven't, or if you have more specific stuff you want to send by email or text or give me a call, I'd be happy to have that conversation, and it might be something we can look at providing. Are there any questions about that? No? Okay, I know I'm giving you a lot of information really quickly here. Are there any questions about anything I've gone over, or any state stuff, federal stuff, anything that we want to cover? I can stop the recording here in a little bit as well, as we can have a little bit more of an informal dialogue. But does anybody have any specific questions that they wanted to bring up right away? Okay. I will go ahead and stop the recording and then we can continue having a dialogue.